Did you hear that? This meeting is being recorded. Okay, so welcome everyone.
You gotta click continue.
Where?
We're seeing that that's on your screen, or I guess maybe that's on my screen.
No.
Okay. All right. Good.
John, I had it on my screen and I just hit continue.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
It was either leave meeting or continue, so I know we would continue.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, you could leave the meeting, whatever. All right. So welcome everyone. It's good to see everybody. We have read the first paragraph of the story of Rabbi Yehuda ben Dama, who on the eve of Shavuot asks for just a little extension, a little bit more time from Caesar. And Caesar here means just the generic term of somebody who's the Roman ruler, who's in charge. And says, I want to thank God. Shavuot is man matan Toratenu. Let me say Kiddush. Let me make Kiddush and thank God for giving us the Torah. So Caesar is taken aback. He says, what are you talking about? You know, what is this? You know, you still put your trust, you still believe in God and the Torah? So, of course, Rabbi Yehuda says, of course I do. And then Caesar goes, but look at what it got you. Look at what's it worth? Look at what you're now about to suffer on behalf of this. So what kind of business is this? So Rabbi Yehuda quotes a verse from the Psalms. How abundant is your goodness you have laid up for them that fear thee. Right? Marav tuvcha asher tzafanta lireyecha. So what's the sense of his answer? What is he trying to say? We can figure it out a little bit more from Caesar's answer, because Caesar takes it, he understands it, right? He says, yeah, I'm going to be suffering and I'm going to be put to death in this world, but there is a great reward for the Torah that God will give to all those who fear God in the next world. So I'll just, I just don't care that this is happening in this world. And then Caesar says, what kind of garbage is that? Right? What are you kidding yourself? There is no other world. And then Rabbi Yehuda goes right back at him. And he says, no, you're the fool. You're the fool who don't understand that there really is a spiritual dimension that goes beyond the material physical world. And your idol worship is nothing. We will see the Or HaChayim, the light of life, and you will go to hell. Right? So he's very, very staunch. He's very, very committed to what he's doing, and he's not afraid. Okay, and with that kind of uppity response and in resistance to Caesar, at once, here we go. Next paragraph.
Sorry, I was muted. At once Caesar's wrath was kindled, and he ordered that Rabbi Yehuda be tied by the hair of his head to the tail of a horse and dragged through every street in Rome. He commanded that the corpse be dismembered afterward.
So what do you think? So did Rabbi Yehuda gain anything? He lost apparently, from a straightforward reading of the story. He wanted that extra extension. He wanted to do one more mitzvah. He wanted to make Kiddush for Shavuot. And now Caesar is so angry at him for giving him lip that he immediately decrees that he's going to be put to death by just being torturously dragged through the street and then dismembered afterwards after he's dead. So he loses. Rabbi Yehuda ben Dama loses that opportunity that he asked for to do that mitzvah of Kiddush. So was this a wise thing for him to have said so challenging a bunch of words to Caesar?
Well, it's in line with his faith. In other words, he's a believer and he wants to fulfill.
Can't hear you. Josie is frozen. Josie got lost. Okay, but the point I think that Josie is making is that he can't be silent. Josie, you back yet? He can't be silent when his faith, when the very fundamentals of his faith are being challenged.
Yeah, this is what he believes.
Right. So we could think of it as he's speaking his conscience, but there is a technical term, and in fact, this is part of the whole series of stories that we have here. We have the idea of making Kiddush for Friday night, for a holiday, for Shavuos, but the word Kiddush is also in the term Kiddush Hashem, right? Which is sanctifying God's name and to stand up for God in the world. To say that this world, despite all of the evidence to the contrary, no, this world is God's world, and there is a God, and God cares, and there is justice. So even though he doesn't say the formula of the words of the prayer to thank God for giving us the Torah, he's saying it in his living. He's thanking God for giving the Torah by saying, this is my life, and I wouldn't think of sacrificing the opportunity to study Torah just for some worldly benefit. So the words of the Kiddush that we recite as a standard prayer, here he's taking it to the most intense meaning. It's the same meaning, except that he's actually really living it out and giving his life for it. Okay, Prophet Elijah.
Where'd it go? Oh, the prophet Elijah, ever remembered for good, came up and gathered the members of Rabbi Yehuda's body and buried them in a cave near the river that flows down through Rome. For 30 days, the Romans heard the sound of lamentation and weeping in the cave. When they came and told Caesar about it, he said, even if the whole world turned to void and desolation, I will not rest until I have my will with these elders.
Okay, so and that's the end of the story for Rabbi Yehuda ben Dama. He is mourned in his grave for 30 days, which is what we have in the biblical story of Aaron as well. That when Aaron died, the children of Israel spent 30 days to cry over his demise. In traditional Jewish mourning, we have the 7 days Shiva, but then we have a 30-day marker also. So here, who in the end tends to Rabbi Yehuda ben Dama's mutilated corpse?
The elders, right?
No, Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet. So of course, Elijah the prophet is this mythic, supernatural type being. He's not a human being like you and I. And it means that the people in Rome, the Jewish, people that were living there, let alone anybody else, nobody would touch this corpse. This is a corpse that the Caesar has decided to wreak his wrath on, and anybody that would be seen taking care of the corpse afterwards would be risking their own life. So it falls on Elijah the prophet to do the chesed shel emet, right? The true act of loving kindness of bringing Rabbi Yehuda's body to burial.
And so it's Elijah lamenting in the cave and weeping?
So it doesn't say who's lamenting. It doesn't say that. It just says that they hear a sound of lamentation. So could it be Elijah? Could be. Who else might it be?
The community.
Well, the community wouldn't be a sound. They would know that people are going into their, it's a mystery, right? There's a mysterious sound of lamentation that they can't put their finger on. It's not like they're flesh and blood people there crying and weeping. Again, if people wanted to, they would still be afraid to jeopardize themselves. So this is a kind of a heavenly sound.
The angels.
This is the angels. This might be God.
Yeah, or other religious people.
Right.
Who've
Other
already
people in
gone.
heaven, or the other martyrs that have already been killed. So, but it's not the earthly community itself. And then we get this very ironic statement by the Caesar.
Yeah, he says it is what it is, right?
Yeah, it's a sort of, yeah, that's an interesting phrase. You should coin it. he says, and they're coming to him because they're saying, "Hey, Caesar, can't you hear? There's this heavenly voice going on here. You're messing with some powers that maybe it would be safer to leave them alone." And Caesar is adamant, and he says, "Even if the whole world turned to void and desolation." This should remind us of an earlier part of the story, right? Let me see if I can find it for us. Look at this paragraph right here. Can you see where I'm circling my cursor? The ministering angels. John, you still there?
Yeah.
You're reading. You can read with a full mouth. It's okay.
Then the ministering angels spoke bluntly to the Holy One. A man so righteous that you showed him all the treasures of the worlds above and the mysteries of the worlds below should be put to death in such a horrible way? Such Torah and such a reward. The Holy One, but what can I do for my son? It is a decree and no one may nullify it. Then a divine voice came forth and said, if I hear one more such cry, I will turn the world to void and desolation.
And then Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol keeps quiet. So, and then again, the do you still, so that is the echo here. Again, is this the reward for the Torah? And then when we come down here, we have the Caesar saying, even if the whole world turned to void and desolation, I will not rest until I have my will with these elders. So we have it, the same words, but they're turned on their head, right? Instead of the angels saying these questions, this is Caesar saying this. Instead of God saying, I'm going to turn if people still keep on asking questions and complaining, I'll destroy the entire world. And now Caesar goes, I don't care. I don't care if God destroys the entire world. I have my agenda. My agenda is to kill all the rabbis. And I'm going to do that come what may. So this is the frustration and the ambivalence of the storytelling, where on the one hand, Rabbi Shmuel doesn't want the world to be destroyed. So Rabbi Shmuel stops calling out in his extreme pain. Remember, he was the first one to be tortured and to be put to death. So he doesn't. So when God says, if I hear one more outcry, I'm destroying the world. Rabbi Shmuel, who's the one who's suffering the most, keeps quiet because he wants to save the world. Here, the Caesar says, I don't care. Let me bring the whole world down crashing around me. I don't care. I want to kill the good guys. That's all there is to it. So there's a real bitter irony in this part of the story, where the people who care the most about keeping the world going are the ones who suffer the destruction most directly. Okay, if anybody has any thoughts, any comments? All right, we're up to
do all these executions occur in Rome?
Some of them occur in Rome. These are these are set in Rome. You have to go back and look where each one is. Not all of them are in Rome, but the idea that this is the Roman authorities. So in terms of keeping the story direct, they put it into Rome.
Rabbi?
Yes.
When we started these, we were talking about the rabbis were being executed for teaching Torah. Now they're being executed just because they're a rabbi.
Oh, that's what a rabbi is.
But the rabbi, what we talked about was that the rabbis were being executed because they taught Torah publicly.
That's what rabbis do. That's what the definition of a rabbi is.
Oh, okay.
So that's
I always thought it was teacher, but
right. It was teacher, but teacher of Torah, not teacher of mathematics or physical education, and the idea of teaching it in any and every context wherever the Jewish people need it. So yes.
So in other words, they would have been slain even if they didn't teach Torah publicly.
Well, that was the choice. Remember, we had that conversation between two rabbis where one rabbi said, lay low, What are you causing trouble for yourself? Keep it private, keep it quiet. Just wait till the storm passes, wait till the next election, happens. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, I think it was, said, no, that's not in the cards. If I'm a rabbi, that means I'm committed to teaching Torah to everyone and anyone. And if I keep it private and silent, then the Jewish people will be bereft of Torah. The Torah is not just for a couple of people. The Torah is for the entire people. So I have to put it out there as a life-giving source for everybody. That was their challenge.
Oh,
Okay. All right. After Rabbi Yehuda ben Daba was slain,
They brought out Rabbi Hutzpit, the interpreter, for execution.
right,
It is said-
Rabbi Chutzpit, the interpreter means he was Rabbi Chutzpit HaMeturgaman. This was the idea. We talked about this other times a few years ago in Shomrei. The idea of Targum. We have Targum for the Torah. Targum means interpretive translation. So what used to happen was that when the Torah was read in public, back to Carol's point, when everybody was, and that's what we do when we read Torah, in shul, the idea that it should be out in public. When we read it in public, there would be a reader, somebody who knew the Torah words, and knew how to either read the Torah or knew how to recite the Torah by heart. And then there would be a meturgaman, an interpreter. The interpreter would take the words that were in Hebrew and translate them into Aramaic, which was the vernacular of the Jewish people in those days, in rabbinic times, with explanation, with a little expansion, with a little interpretation. So this rabbi, Rabbi Chutzpit, this was his specialty. His specialty was that he would stand in the gatherings and in the synagogues, and he would translate and interpret the Torah for people to be able to understand it easier.
Is this where chutzpah comes from?
I wondered.
No.
Nope. All right. Where were we?
Right here, it is said.
It is said, Rabbi Chutzpah, the interpreter, that he was 130 years old when he was taken out to be slain. He was handsome in countenance, beautiful in appearance, resembling an angel of the Lord of hosts. They came and told Caesar of his beauty and his venerable years, saying, Sire, by your life, have mercy on this old man. Caesar asked Rabbi Chutzpah, how old are you? Rabbi Chutzpah, 130 less 1 day, and I beg of you that you wait until this, my last day, reaches its end. Caesar, what does it matter whether you die today or tomorrow? Rabbi Chutzpah, so that I may fulfill 2 more precepts. Caesar, what precepts do you wish to perform? Chutzpah, reciting the Shema on the evening and the morning, whereby I assert over me the kingship of the unique, great, and awesome name. Caesar, oh, impudent ones, oh, arrogant ones, how long will you persist in trusting your God? He is now old and has no strength to save you from my hand. If he still had such strength, he would have taken vengeance for himself, vengeance for his people, and vengeance for his house, as he did to Pharaoh and Sisera and all the kings of Canaan.
Okay, so here we are with this new victim, and we have a similar kinds of moves, except that the details are a little different. Earlier we had Rabbi Yehuda ben Dama saying, give me a little extra time, just give me another hour, let Shavuos finally begin, let me do a mitzvah, I'll make Kiddush, let me live a little bit longer. And of course that doesn't work. And now we have this sage, and he says, just give me one more day. Give me one more day to live. Don't kill me today, kill me tomorrow. And Caesar says, what's the difference? 1 day, more or less, 130 years you lived, enough. What do you care? And he says, because every day I can do a mitzvah. I can do 2 mitzvahs. I can say the Shema tonight, and then tomorrow morning I'll say the Shema again. And I will declare God's unity and God's greatness and my own love for God. Let me do that. Give me a chance to do 1 more day, 2 more mitzvahs. So, of course, that's also part of this message, right? There are these grandiose things. These are rabbis who know the Torah, who teach the Torah in public, to masses of people, to very, very learned disciples. But in the end, what they're asking for is very simple stuff that any Jew could perform. Right? They're not asking, let me, study the deepest mysteries of the Torah. Let me give one more lecture or something like that. All they're asking for is a simple opportunity to do the most basic kinds of commandments, the most basic kinds of holy acts that every Jew is supposed to perform. And each one of these acts are precious. Each one of these acts, they would love to be able to do. Give me just a little more time to do one more of these. I've told this story before, and I can't resist telling it again because it's such to me, an amazing and beautiful story. I knew a woman in my previous congregation, and she was dying of cancer, and it was right before Pesach, and all the treatments and everything hadn't been able to save her, and she was waning. She was everybody knew she was going to die any minute, and she was being taken care of by her daughter, and it was around the springtime. It was around the springtime. It was a week or so before Pesach. And of course, she knew that she wasn't going to live that long. But the morning that she died, and she was very weak, she was in bedridden for a long time. The morning that she died, she got up from her bed and she went over to her work table, her desk, and her daughter sees her writing out a note and a check. And she goes over there and she goes, "Ma, what are you, crazy? What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And her mother said, "Because Pesach is next week. And I'm not going to live to see Pesach. I'm not going to live to be with you at the Seder. But at least I can do one more mitzvah. I'm writing a check and selling my chametz. So at least I have one more mitzvah that I can do." And that was the day that she died. And she, the whole thing is totally not logical, because guess what? When Pesach happened, she was no longer alive. She didn't have to worry about her chametz. But this was an act of holiness that she did her whole life, her whole adult life, and she wanted to hold on to go out in holiness. That's what we're going to see as a theme again and again. So she said, "Let me do one more mitzvah." She summoned all her strength to do this. So that's just a simple person. And these great rabbis are saying that's in the end where it all hangs, to do these simple things. It's not how much you know and how much you can analyze and everything. It's the doing. It's the doing. And then Caesar, comes back with the great challenge, the great question that people have asked throughout the ages. So you believe in a God like that? Where's the God? Where's your God? Obviously, your God doesn't have the strength, or doesn't have the existence, or doesn't have the heart to stop all of this. So, you're a fool. You're a fool. Okay, so now here we are.
When Rabbi Chutzpah heard this, he broke down in unrestrained weeping and rent his garments at the blasphemy against the Lord and the reviling of him. Then he said to Caesar, "Woe unto you, Caesar! What will you do on the last day when the Lord will visit punishment on Rome and on your gods?" Caesar, "How long am I to argue with this one?" He commanded that Rabbi Chutzpah be put to death, and they stoned him and hanged him.
Okay, and that was it. So how do people understand this idea of Rabbi Chutzpah breaking down, crying, and tearing his clothes? What's that about?
It's about it. He's feeling the slight to God. He's feeling
Right.
disrespect to God.
Right. It's not about him. It's not, I mean, what he's doing is what people would do when they lose a loved one. Right. And certainly he's about to lose himself, but he's not mourning for himself. He's mourning that the world is such that people like Caesar can spit at God. And he is crying over God's lack of honor and appreciation in the world. This is
So
what
he
he's
chooses that reason rather than to try to argue that even though God isn't saving him, God is still powerful.
right. No more argument. You're right.
Argument he hears about.
Good point. Right. He's not. He doesn't in the end say this. I'm going to keep on debating this man. He says what he says. He says he has a staunch faith, and then he says in the end, look, how can you be so, talk about chutzpah? How can you be so chutzpah against God? Caesar's the one with the chutzpah. And the sage says to him, in the end, what are you going to do? What are you going to answer to God? You can kill me, but what are you going to do in the end when God brings punishment on Rome? Okay, and then of course that doesn't do any good for him, and he is put to death. Go ahead.
After Rabbi Chutzpah was slain, they brought out Rabbi Hanina ben Hakinai for execution. Of Rabbi Hanina ben Hakinai, it is said that throughout his days, from the age of 12 to 95, he kept observing fasts. The day they took him out to be slain was the eve of Sabbath. His disciples asked, Master, do you wish to eat something before you were put to death? And he replied, I fasted until now. I know not what road I'm about to take, and you tell me to eat and drink. He began the Kiddush for the day with, and we're finished, and reached, he made holy, but they did not let him conclude it before they slew him. A divine voice came forth and said, Blessed are you, Rabbi Hanina ben Hakinai. You are holy, and your soul left you at the word holy.
So here, now let's stop for a second. This is now one more episode. So this Rabbi Hanina ben Hakinai was an ascetic, right? This is a person who didn't seek to enjoy this world in any way, but to master his physical needs and his limitations and transcend them, to be more spiritual. So of course this is a kind of an extreme approach that is not common, not celebrated extensively, but nevertheless, it was a famous ongoing, well-known approach that Judaism doesn't favor asceticism. That's in general true. Nevertheless, certain holy people did adopt an ascetic approach of fasting and of depriving themselves of wine or of other kinds of enjoyments, and they were considered to be exceptional. They weren't the models for everybody else to follow, but they were considered to be the exceptional models of holiness. And we have this man who spent over 70 years engaged in regular fasting. How come he started at age 12? How come he started at age 12? Why didn't he start when he was 13, when he was bar mitzvah?
Maybe he's trying to get an early start.
Exactly.
Practice.
Exactly.
It's like an aspiration.
Right. And this is, this is, of course, one of the things that the tradition understands. There is a rule, right? You're a bar mitzvah when you hit 13. You're not bar mitzvah before you hit 13. So that's the cut and dried rule. But then there's life. There's real living. And each person matures at their own rate. And each person has their own emotional growth and their own physical maturation and so on. So for instance, in terms of fasting for Yom Kippur, there's a long tradition of trying to prepare the children before they become bar mitzvah. So they would, parents would train their kids, skip breakfast, when you're 10. Fast until 2 o'clock when you're 11. Different kinds of steps like that, so that by the time you're 13, you have been prepared and trained to be able to fast as you're commanded to do. Or putting on tefillin. What do you put on tefillin only the day after you become a bar mitzvah? The tradition is a month ahead of time, you practice putting on tefillin, even though you're not obligated to. So that when you finally do it out of obligation, you're also comfortable with it. It's also part of your way of behavior. So here is Hanina ben Chachinai in terms of his mental development. By 12, this was a path that he was taking for himself. He chose this very demanding path, and for 70 more years he keeps to it. And then now we have that he's being taken out to be killed, and it's Erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos. And his disciples say to him, can we give you one last meal? In the horrible situation that we have in the United States, where the death penalty still exists, there's a tradition, right? You can have anything you want for your last meal, right? There's this kind of like gruesome idea that that's being nice to the person who's going to be executed. We like you here. You want a hot dog with all the fixings? Sure, we'll give you that, and then bam, then we kill you. So here the disciples, they're not cruel like that, but what they're saying is, we want to do something for you. We want to be nice to you. We want to support you. Can we give you something to eat? And he says, what, are you kidding? Because I've been fasting my whole life. And then he says a phrase here that we should take to heart a little bit. I know not what road I am about to take. What is he saying when he says that?
Well, as holy as he's been, he's not confident that he will be taken to heaven right away. He doesn't know what might happen.
Right. And even if he's taken to heaven, does he know what that road is really?
No, he doesn't. Nobody really knows.
Nobody
Until
really.
you get there, and there's no way you can tell the people back on Earth what it's like.
So he says, I don't know what's really in store for me. And you want me to eat and drink, eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die.
Yeah.
That's not his approach, right? He is, to the very last moment, concerned about making his life mean something. Right? And he does eat, though, as we're about to see, right? He makes kiddush. For Shabbos, he eats. Shabbos, you're not allowed to fast. Shabbos is supposed to be a day of physical as well as spiritual fulfillment. So he makes kiddush, and he starts with, and we're finished. Does anybody know what that is? That's the word vayachulu.
Like Vahirev, right at the beginning,
Right.
like was finished on making the 6th day, I think.
Right. Vayera vayboker yom hashishi vayachulu hashamayim b'haaretz. And the heavens and earth were finished. Right after 6 days of creation, everything was finished. So he starts with that beginning of the paragraph from the Torah, and he reached that
Kadesh,
God
right?
blessed the 7th day and made it holy.
Oh, I thought it was the very end.
Right? So that's what he got up to, but they did not let him conclude it. He didn't get to the very end. They didn't let him finish, and they kill him in the middle of his prayer. But then the divine voice says, but look what you said. Look at the words that came out of your mouth. Right? So your soul departed by saying the word holy.
Okay. Is that the Mikadesh HaShabbat at the end?
That Mekadesh Shabbat means God makes the Shabbat holy.
Right. That's what I thought it meant. Like he just barely didn't get to just wouldn't let him get to the very last word.
Right. So I'm reading it that he gets to the end of the biblical passage. The Vayachulu is a biblical passage. Before you make the blessing on the wine, itself, you go by Chulu Hashamayim Ba'aretz, V'chol Tzvam Ba'yichal Kim Yom Hashvi Malachto Asher Asa V'yishbot B'yom Hashvi Mikom Malachto Asher Asa V'yivarech Elohim Mikom Hashvi V'yikadesh Oto. God blessed the seventh day, and God made it holy. Right? So that's what I'm reading it. But maybe he got even further, but not quite to that word Shabbat. But the idea is that he got to the word holiness, that God made Shabbat holy, and you also, your soul left you at the word holy. Okay, so to say it in a bitter way, next.
Yeah, God. After Rabbi Hanina ben Hakinai was slain, they brought out Rabbi Yeshevav the scribe for execution. As he was being brought out, his disciples came to him and said, "Oh, Master."
So somebody just chimed. What does that mean?
Yeshevav.
Hold on. I had to admit Helen. Helen just came in. Okay, good. Back to you. So yes, as he was being brought out. Go ahead.
As he was being brought out, his disciples came to him and said, "Oh, Master, what is to become of Torah?" Rabbi Yeshevav, "My children, Torah is destined to be forgotten in Israel. For this wicked Roman nation in its insolence is brazenly plotting to have us lose our precious pearls, the sages. Oh, if only I could be the expiation for the people of this generation. But I foresee that not a street in Rome will be without one slain by the sword, for this wicked nation will persist in shedding innocent blood in Israel." The disciples, "Oh, Master, what will become of us?" Rabbi Yeshevav, strengthen one another, love peace and justice, there may be hope.
Okay, so this is a pretty grim scene. And again, we've had it many times. Each of these teachers has students that ask them questions and so on. So here, the students ask, what about the future? What's going to happen? They're killing our greatest teachers. What does the future hold? And what's Rabbi Yeshevav's immediate answer? What's his first part of his answer?
Strengthen each other.
Don't give up.
That's the last part of his answer. What's the first part of his answer? The Torah is destined to be forgotten in Israel. He says Torah is coming on a hard time. All of the pearls of the Jewish people, all of the precious teachers of Torah are being taken one by one and killed off. The Torah is going to suffer. The Torah is going to suffer as a result. And people will forget the Torah. They won't know the Torah anymore. The transmission, the living tradition of passing on the teachings and learning from a master and then becoming a master oneself and teaching one's children and teaching other students, all of that is being decimated here. It's not gonna be able to just bounce back. And he says, not one street in Rome will be without a corpse. The death and the devastation is going to be horrible. This is like really doomsday. This is terrible vision of the future. When to apply it to modern history, in the Shoah, this was one of the real costs of the Shoah, was that the community of Jews that was dedicated so much to the Torah was almost completely wiped out. Obviously the Jewish people in general, one out of 3 in the world, 1 out of 2 in Europe, half the population of Europe, the Jewish population of Europe, was destroyed. But of that half, it was something like 90% of the community of Jews that was involved with studying Torah. So the Torah took a gigantic hit. what we see today, and again, now I'm going to just use this as an opportunity to editorialize a little bit. What we see today is in the ultra-Orthodox world, a very determined decision to resist that devastation and to create a community despite all of the devastation that happened. However, from my perspective, their concern to try to re-establish the Torah is itself very flawed, and it's actually still an expression of the forgetting of the Torah. The Torah has been forgotten in a very significant way. And when we see the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community acting stupidly, acting without a sense of respect for the rest of the world, I know where it comes from, but why is there so much?
It's David's cell phone. It has a lot of feedback. You can mute him if you want.
David, can you hit mute, please? Whatever it is, *6 or something.
I have somebody.
Okay.
Thank you. And that sounds a little calmer. So I think that the ultra-Orthodox community is guilty now of terrible, terrible, outrageous, sinful behavior, but because they've forgotten the Torah, because they've actually, gotten into some really screwed up way of thinking about the Torah, which
Are you talking about the recent, the COVID stuff that they won't?
COVID stuff is just like, again, it's like COVID does for everything. It highlights long existing previous
Right.
conditions.
It's like the True Vision virus, I think.
So yeah, it brings us, into sharp focus about things that have been wrong for a long time, and they just get expressed now in very vivid and painful ways. So the Torah being forgotten is a fear that has been in the traditional Jewish community since the time of the rabbis. This has been expressed. It's expressed in Talmudic stories. Besides this story, what's going to be? How are we going to be able to keep the Torah alive? And then they say, this disciple says, so what about us? We're going to be orphans, right? We're going to have, you're our teacher and you're now going to be murdered. What should we do? What can we do? And this is it's such a simple answer, and it's so, it's almost a platitude, and yet it's the most profound truth. What does he say to them? What's his last lesson? What you were saying before, John.
Strengthen one another, love, peace, and justice. There may be hope.
Right.
There
may be hope, right? So he says, even though I'm saying, oy vey, look at how terrible it is. Look at the damage that's being caused. Look at the losses that we're suffering. All of that is true, but that doesn't mean that you lose hope completely. You have to hold on to, if not hope, the possibility of hope.
There may
Maybe hope, right? And for that, you need a community of people that will be there for each other, to stand together with each other, and the basic values of peace and justice. Love, peace, and justice. The world is full of violence and injustice, and you have to love peace and justice. All right, Caesar. Let's see if we can get to the end of the story.
Caesar asked Rabbi Yeshevav, old man, how old are you? Rabbi Yeshevav, 90 years old this day, but even before I left my mother's womb, a decree came forth from the Holy One to turn me and my colleagues over to your power. But the Holy One will demand our blood from you. Caesar, hasten to put to death this one also, and let me see the power and strength of his God. Caesar gave the command, and they burned him.
Go ahead.
After Rabbi Yeshevav was slain, they brought out Rabbi Elazar ben Shammua, right?
Yep, good.
For execution. Of Rabbi Elazar ben Shammua, it is said that he was 105 years old, and that from his childhood to the end of his days, no man heard a frivolous word issue from his mouth. He did not allow himself to become annoyed with his colleagues, either by what they said or what they did. He was humble and meek for 80 years, observed more fasts than the number prescribed. The day he was put to death was Yom Kippur. His disciples came to him and asked, "O Master, what do you see?" Rabbi Elazar, "I see Rabbi Yehuda ben Bavi's bier being carried side by side with the bier of Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, and they are arguing with each other over a question in halacha."
So who are these two people that he's mentioning?
Ben Bava is the guy we just had just a while ago.
Right. So he's mentioning a couple of the martyrs. He's saying, I see the coffin of this martyr and I see the coffin of that martyr. So they're dead, but their bodies are being carried. And guess what? As their bodies are being carried along, they're alive and arguing in matters of Torah. They're discussing Torah among themselves. That's what I see.
The disciples, and who endeavors to bring harmony between them? Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Ishmael, the high priest.
Okay, another one of the martyrs. We had him early on. That's the one that we just looked at about the God saying, "Don't complain, otherwise I'll destroy the world."
Who prevails? Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Akiva, because he labored with all his might in Torah. Rabbi Elazar went on, "My children, I see more. The soul of each and every righteous man purifies itself in the waters of Siloam."
Siloam, yeah, it's Shiloach. Yeah.
To enter in purity this day into the academy on high and listen to Rabbi Akiva's exposition of the passage for the day. And each and every angel brings a golden chair for each and every righteous man to sit upon in purity. Caesar commanded that he be put to death. A divine voice came forth and said, "Blessed are you, Rabbi Elazar ben Shammua. You were pure and your soul left you with the word purity." Rabbi Yochanan said, "Woe unto the nations of the world, for there is no mending for them. Scripture says, for brass of the nations I will bring gold, and for iron I will bring silver, and for wood brass." But Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues, what more precious a commodity could be bought? Concerning these notions, Scripture asserts, "Though I cleanse them of their transgressions,
Of other transgressions.
I cleanse them of other transgressions. From the blood they shed, I shall not cleanse them."
Okay, and that's it. That's the end of this. So we have a vision of redemption and of purity and of exaltation, and then we have a vision of vengeance. Right? The vision that Rabbi Elazar ben Shammua has is that all of these sages who were viciously murdered, they really keep on living and they keep on engaging in what they love so much, which is to study God's Torah and to create new ideas and to expound upon them. And the angels are welcoming them into paradise. So that's one beautiful vision, and that's his vision as he's led to death, right? That he sees that he's joining, like that song, right? When the saints come marching, I want to be in their number. So he sees himself joining all of these exalted holy people. And then Rabbi Yochanan is from the 3rd century CE. So he's a little bit, he's a couple of generations after this martyrdom. And he says, this is unforgivable, right? What the nations of the world have done to us can never be forgiven, can never be just wiped away, can never be expiated. There are all kinds of bad things people can pay for, and things can be made up. But when it comes to the shedding of blood, that's it, right?
It's interesting that Caesar has nothing to say to him at all. That it's because he's not talking about Caesar. It's almost like somebody else we know, that if there's nothing being said about him, he doesn't care anything. He has no interest in it unless he's the focus of it.
Right. But on the other hand, the same thing. Rabbi Elazar ben Shammua doesn't care about Caesar.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, because he doesn't actually say anything to Caesar like, you wait till God comes and gets you. He doesn't say, he doesn't even acknowledge Caesar almost.
Right.
He
His
doesn't- he's
vision, his
into his
vision, is already- right, into the next,
Right.
the next,
And Caesar, if you're not going to talk about Caesar, Caesar's not interested at all.
right. And not only that, but Caesar loses all of his power. When you don't talk about Caesar, then Caesar doesn't exist. The Caesar thrives on your talking about Caesar. Caesar thrives on paying attention to Caesar.
That's why he tweets so much.
That's the idea, right? All right, so we made it through these very harrowing stories. I hope that some of it has been meaningful or touching or inspiring, maybe even. Sacred stories of our people. So I invite everybody next week, and we'll see what's in store next week. Now, how do I change? How do I? Where do I
Stop
go?
sharing. Up above it, there's a red tag that says stop sharing.
No, but where do I stop recording?
Oh, I'm not. I have a different screen since I'm not
Oh,
the.
it's not in the participant, in the more participants in the more, and now,
Probably at the bottom somewhere.
no, it's not there. I'm going to stop sharing. That's what I'm going to do first. And now,
We can see each other again.
right. Bye. And now, if I end it, then it'll end the recording too, right?
Yeah, probably, but it's probably better to stop the recording. But I guess we just end it.
So
I'm gonna stop the recording because I'm worried it won't record.
oh, here it is. Stop recording.
There you go.
Stop recording.